This is MacVoices TV. Welcome to MacVoices TV. This is the talk of the Mac community, and I'm Chuck Joyner. Folks, I'd like a new Macintosh. You'd like a new Macintosh. We'd all like a new Macintosh because they're bigger, better, but usually the big appeal is faster. Unfortunately, we can't all afford a new Macintosh every time we want one. So we turn to our friend Joe Kissell, who is the author of the brand new Take Control of Speeding Up Your Mac from the Take Control ebook series, to solve our problem. Joe, welcome back to MacVoices TV.
Very nice to be here. And you know, I sorry, I didn't mean to interrupt you there, but I had a new Mac, a great, fantastic, the fastest, most tricked out iMac that Apple sells until they came out with their latest model. And so all of a sudden, you know, I no longer have bragging rights that I have such a fast Mac. So this is really, you know, this is kind of a book for me as much as anyone else. It enables me to extend my investment and have the fastest Mac for longer, or at least a very, very fast Mac.
Yeah, it's funny how we all have that same syndrome that as soon as a new Mac comes out, suddenly ours seems to slow down, even though it performs exactly like it did 10 minutes before.
That's right.
Joe, this looks to be a pretty important book. This may be one of the broadest appealing books you've ever written.
I hope it is. I am super excited about this book. I mean, I've written a lot of books, and a lot of them that have sold very well, but I'm super excited about this book. I think this is the book that sort of everyone has been waiting for. You know, when we've talked about backups endlessly, and I've written a lot about it, and that's an important thing that everybody should be doing, and that's you know, book has sold well and so on. But what I hear more often than anything else from people I talk to about their Macs is that, I mean, yeah, if I have a problem, I can go to some troubleshooting guide or go to a web page or go to an Apple store or whatever. I can solve the problem. But what if my Mac is just kind of slow? Man, this web page is taking forever, or this Flash video is stuttering, or my Mac just seems to take a long time to connect to the internet or to save a file, or it just generally feels sluggish. I mean, I hear that so much. And I've experienced it, obviously, myself, too, with the many Macs that I've owned. And I was just thinking about this several months ago, and I was thinking, we need to solve this problem. And I read many, many things that other people have written, websites, blogs, you know, utilities, books, ebooks, just all kinds of stuff out there on speeding up your Mac. But all due respect to the people who created all those things, I really don't like any of them. And so they all left me wanting, and what they left me wanting was the book I just wrote. So this is for everybody out there who has ever felt like their Mac is just too slow, and they don't have a lot of money to spend, and the other things that they've read about speeding up your Mac aren't quite cutting it. This is the definitive solution.
Okay, that's a pretty bold claim. And if it were anyone but you making it, I'd probably abuse them a little bit. But with you, I know how thorough you are. I know how detailed you are. So let's get started. Obviously, we're not going to cover the whole book. But what can I do other than the things I may already know? Or maybe we need to start with the basics to speed up my Mac. What do you suggest?
Yes. Well, in fact, there are a lot of the guides that you'll find right now about speeding up your Mac sort of take a scattershot approach. Well, here's a list of 10 things or 72 things or however many different things you could try. And we don't really know if any of them will speed up your Mac or how much they'll speed up your Mac, but they might, and you can try them. And so you look at this long list and it's like, well, this one's going to take me an hour to do, and this one's going to take me 3 hours to do, and this one is going to make me restart 3 times. And like, really, is it worth it? And what I realized was there is no reason that we shouldn't be scientific here. I mean, you can measure speed. It's actually really, really easy to measure speed. And so you can take a measurement and then change something and then take another measurement and compare. And you can see for yourself, did this speed it up or not? And there are a lot of things out there about speeding up your Mac that are sort of, there are some myths out there and some misconceptions, and there are some things that are based on sort of iffy evidence, like, well, I heard that some guy tried this thing and man, it sped up his Mac enormously. And you know, that might have been true. It might have been that some guy did something and it did speed up his Mac, but then again, his Mac might have had something really weird going on with it that yours doesn't. And so I'm like, you know, let's throw out all the guessing. Let's throw out all the myths. Let's throw out all the just try it and find out. Let's be scientific. We're going to take measurements. We're going to do a before and after, and we're going to see, you know, so there are problems that you can figure out in advance of doing some procedure. Will this procedure help? And there are some other things where you can't necessarily tell in advance, but you can use tools that come with your Mac, and you can use free tools that you can download to give you data to go on. And you can actually pin down exactly what is the cause of the problem. Before we started recording this, Chuck, you were telling me about something, you're not sure what, was sucking down all of your internet bandwidth. But how do you figure out what that is? I mean, you can look in Activity Monitor and see, well, oh yeah, my internet bandwidth is spiking right now. But how do you tell what that thing is, or what those processes are that are eating all that up? It's not obvious. I tell you how to do that in this book, if I look sort of unreasonably gleeful about this, I am gleeful about it, because in the process of writing this book, I figured out how to do a lot of things that I didn't know how to do before, and now I tell you. So you can see that you have a lot of disk activity. You can hear, you know, your hard disk is clicking and whirring, and it's doing all this kind of stuff, and it's really busy doing something. And in Activity Monitor, for example, or other utilities, you can see, oh, well, this is using up so much CPU, and this is using up so much RAM. But those tools don't tell you which particular application or process is hammering on your hard disk. But I tell you how to do that. I learned how to do it in the course of writing this book. And now that I know, I can tell you. And so the whole book is like that. We start with diagnostic principles. I'm going to, you know, so I say, like, look, you go to the doctor and you say, doctor, I feel yucky. And the doctor's like, I don't have a pill for that. If you want me to solve your problem, you need to give me a little bit more to go on than I feel yucky. And the more detail you can give, the better diagnosis and the better solution your doctor can provide. So it's just like that with your Mac. You can't just go and say, my Mac feels slow. That's not helpful. You need to pin down exactly what part of it is slow and why is it slow, and then you can solve it. So I walk you through that whole thing. I teach you the sort of scientific method simplified to apply only to speeding up your Mac, and how you can figure out what the problem is. I tell you about benchmarking, which sounds like this really, you know, crazy complicated thing, but really it's super simple. You click a couple of buttons, you get a number, and then you do something else, and you click the buttons again, you get another number, and you compare. Really, really easy. And I talk about all these other methods for ascertaining different aspects of your Mac's performance. And then I say, okay, now I know you're really eager to speed up your Mac, and it's really bothering you right now that it's so slow. And some of these things, you know, we're going to do tests and we're going to do procedures. It's going to take a while. So just to get you over this initial hump, here are some quick fixes that often will speed up problems without even necessarily knowing exactly what the underlying cause is. This is just to kind of, you know, get you into it. Now that you've gone through this chapter, you've applied these quick fixes. Now let's go back and start performing some tests. And then, you know, if you find out through your tests that you're running out of RAM, then here are all the different things you can do about that. If you find out that your problem is that you've got too much disk access, then here's what to do about that. If you find out that your problem is you don't have enough internet bandwidth, or that something is sucking it up, here's what to do about that. So I go through all these different sorts of problems that could contribute to slow Mac performance, and I talk about all the ways that you address them. But we're scientific. We do experiments, and we come up with, we have a hypothesis. We say, okay, what experiment would prove or disprove this? We do the experiment, we come up with a result, and we either say, yes, success, that now I know, or we say, no, that wasn't it, and I'm going to do another experiment. And if you just do this systematically with your Mac, you can solve almost any sort of performance problem, and you can, at the very least, get your Mac back to as fast as it was the day you bought it, and in many cases go quite a bit beyond that. So that's sort of, you can see that I'm kind of excited about this, right? I'm just talking and I can't stop. I'm just giving you the whole book, but it really is exciting to me because this is something that's bugged me, it's bugged my friends, and I decided, no, look, I'm just going to figure it out, and I spent a lot of time and effort and research, and I got a lot of help on this. I mean, Dan Frakes helped out, a lot of other Tidbits and Take Control people helped out, and I finally sort of got to the bottom of a lot of these really vexing issues. And it's a long book. I mean, it's like almost 200 pages, but it's solid content, and I'm really proud of it. So I hope that everybody finds it super helpful.
Joe, we're talking in some generalities here, and you're talking about the approach, the scientific approach. Scientific approach is great, and I think everyone can follow scientific. But how geeky do you get? I mean, are you going to have me digging around in the terminal or looking at console logs and doing those kind of things? Not that that's a bad thing, and a large portion of our audience is very comfortable doing that. There is a portion that's not comfortable, and they want to speed their Mac up too.
Right. I'm very sensitive to that. I'm really actually very sensitive to both sides of it. So for those users who are comfortable in terminal and who are of a more geeky bent, I have information in there for you. It's labeled. I'll say, like, geek alert. If you don't mind mucking around in terminal, here, go ahead and play with this. If you would really rather skip that and just have like a picture that you can click on, do this instead. So I tried to be very clear in the book about which kinds of things are really only for advanced users, and which sorts of things are for everybody. But the vast majority of the things in the book are really just things anybody can do. And when we get to a point where it's like, okay, now we got to talk about RAM. RAM is super important when it comes to performance. And I wish I could tell you just, click a button, wave your hand, and your RAM problems will be gone. But really, if you want to solve your RAM problems, you have to understand some things about how RAM works on a Mac. But it's okay because I explain it. There are some weird terms that you might not have encountered before, and you can trust me that this is my business of trying to make complex subjects easy to understand for ordinary folks. And so I have done what if I do say so myself, I think I've done a pretty good job of taking some of these weird, arcane topics that you may have sort of read a little bit about, but you don't quite get it, and it's still kind of puzzling to you. And I've tried to take all those topics and just say, okay, this is what an ordinary person needs to understand about, wired versus active versus inactive memory, or whatever it is. And I also try as much as possible to summarize and say, okay, now we're going to talk about this one thing here. For example, I have this section on myths and misconceptions about speeding up your Mac, and so a lot of people say, we'll do this and that'll speed up your Mac, and I say, okay, the summary, the 3 lines is, no, this won't work 90% of the time, and here's why. And now I'm going to, so I give you just like a capsule summary, and then I say, now for all the technical details, read below. So I've tried as hard as I can to address both the most basic user who doesn't know or want to know any of the technical stuff, and the more advanced user who is very happy to fiddle around with preference files and terminal commands and all that stuff.
Okay, so you make me feel a little better about the approachability of the whole book. I'm sure it runs a spectrum.
It's a very approachable book, if I do say so myself.
Joe, give us an idea of maybe some software that we will be expected to acquire. And I say acquire because I don't know if it's free. I don't know if you are set on certain utilities to help you accomplish some of these things, whether they're monitoring or taking corrective measures.
Right. Okay, so I do talk a lot about software that is included with Mac OS X, especially Activity Monitor. Activity Monitor is right there in your utilities folder, inside your applications folder. Every Mac has it. And it may not be the very best tool for monitoring all the different things your Mac can do, but it's a really good tool, and it's easy to use. And there are a lot of things about it that aren't obvious to someone who doesn't know all the details about the inner workings of Mac OS X. But I explain a lot of those things. I say, okay, here are the only parts of Activity Monitor that you really need to worry about, and here is what they mean, and how to use it to give you just the piece of information that you really care about. So that's a really good one. That's an example. And of course, we do pop into Terminal a couple of times. There are some benchmarking tools that I really recommend that you can download for free, like Xbench and Geekbench. And so those are important for getting a sense of the overall performance of your Mac. So if you're not looking for a particular thing like how fast a web page is load, but rather how fast is my Mac in general, then you can use one of these tools. Just takes a few minutes, it gives you a number, and it's like a score. How fast is your Mac? And then you can do things to change your Mac, like turning off software, or changing preferences, or increasing your RAM, or doing various things to your Mac, and then run the test again. You say, oh, well, by doing this, it made my Mac this much faster or this much slower. But those tools are free and they're easy to use. There are a bunch of tools that I recommend for monitoring things that are happening on your Mac as you're using it. Now, you can use Activity Monitor that way, but I don't feel it's the best. I really like using menu meters, which puts little icons up in your menu bar to tell you what your Mac is doing right at that instant. And so that's also free. And there are a bunch of other monitoring tools. Of course, you may need to use applications like Disk Warrior or Drive Genius or TechTool Pro, one of these things that will repair errors on a disk that could come up. And if it turns out that you do need one of those, then that's going to be about $100. And there is an app that we were talking about earlier before we started the recording called RubberNet, which you can find at rubbernetapp.com. Which it's a new app, and it's really, really cool. It tells you exactly which processes on your Mac are using how much of your internet bandwidth. I've never seen anything like it. It's really spectacular. And so it costs a little bit of money. I want to say it's like $30, $35, something like that, but it's a really cool tool. So I do talk about a number of apps that you can buy for both monitoring and repair. A lot of them are free. Some of them cost a little bit of money. But I'm mostly focused on things that you can do that cost little or no money. Now, I should say, though, that there is a section in the book about hardware upgrades, because some of the things that you can do to make your Mac faster, in some cases dramatically faster, do require new hardware. And I try to be sensitive about price. There are cheaper and more expensive versions of these things. But the biggest thing is RAM. I mean, if you have just a little bit of money to spend on your Mac and you want the biggest bang for the buck, the best thing you can do is add more RAM. And so I talk about how to figure out how much RAM you need, and where to buy it from, and how to know that you're getting the right kind of RAM, and all that sort of thing. I also talk about storage. I mean, right now, solid-state drives, or SSDs, are a big deal. There's a lot of buzz about them. Well, actually, there's no buzz. They're silent. They have no moving parts. Sorry.
Jeez.
But there's a lot of interest in SSDs, and a lot of Macs are increasingly coming with them either by default or as an option. And they're kind of expensive for the amount of storage you get, but they're also super, super fast. I mean, my Mac here, my iMac has an SSD in it, and I love it. The difference in time between this one and my MacBook Pro in how long it takes to boot up and how long it takes to open applications and things, just night and day. So I'm loving my SSD, but it is expensive, and especially as you get into the higher capacities. So I talk about things like, okay, look, I want an SSD. I can only afford a really small one, like maybe a 40 gigabyte SSD. But I have all this other stuff. I have all this other data, all these other applications. What do I do with it? Where do I put them? How can I get at them? And there are actually some pretty clever strategies for where you can put that stuff and what you can do with them. And I talk about many of those in the book. So I am really trying to save you money. I mean, I say quite clearly, the techniques in this book will get you a lot of extra mileage. They won't last you forever. Sooner or later, the day will come when you have to buy a new Mac if you want better performance. especially because, new software versions come out. They have bigger system requirements. They need a beefier processor. They need more RAM. They need more video power, whatever. New versions of Mac OS X require better processors, that sort of thing. This happens all the time. It's normal. No matter how much you do to your Mac, there's going to come a time, whether it's 3 years or 5 years or 8 years, so sooner or later you're going to have to get a new Mac if you want decent performance. But I'm hoping that the information in this book can extend the useful life of your Mac a lot longer than it would have been otherwise, and it can save you quite a lot of money as well as a lot of time as you use it.
Joe, there's so many places I'd like to go with this, and we can't cover the whole book, and it wouldn't be fair to you or fair to the listeners. One thing I do want to ask, though, about, you're talking a lot about diagnosing and fixing problems. Somehow, you may have created those problems on your Mac. Your Mac may have created them itself. Software may have created them. Do you talk anything about, right, I guess we might call it preventive steps to keep your Mac from slowing down?
Well, it's funny you should mention that, because as it turns out, I now appear to have a trilogy of sort of Mac fitness books. So the first book I did, in what I did not realize at the time would be a trilogy, was Take Control of Maintaining Your Mac. And so Take Control of Maintaining Your Mac was all about preventive maintenance. So it was all about keeping your Mac running smoothly, preventing problems from occurring later on. And some of the problems that you will in fact prevent by doing those things are speed related. And then the second book I did was Take Control of Troubleshooting Your Mac, which, by the way, is coming out with a new edition right around now. And troubleshooting was about actually solving problems. And again, as it turns out, one of the problems that your Mac might experience is being too slow. But in troubleshooting, I really only spent a couple of pages talking about speed-related issues. It was more focused on things like crashes and bugs and won't turn on and those sorts of things. In this book, which is the longest of the three, I'm addressing that one portion of it, speed issues, in vastly more detail. Now, of course, if you do something in this book to solve a speed problem, that is also going to have a certain preventative effect. But what I suggest, forgive me for being a little capitalistic here, but please buy all three books. What I suggest is sort of for the whole package, get all three. Get maintaining for preventive stuff, get troubleshooting for solving problems, and get speeding up for performance. So they all address a piece of the puzzle. There is a little bit of overlap between the three books, but really this one covers loads of territory that's not even hinted at in the others. And although it does talk a little bit about preventive things, it's mostly about fixing issues that have led to your Mac being slow. Whether, as you say, whether there are things that you have inadvertently caused yourself or things that just happened.
Okay, I can't wait for the book, Joe. I need to know the answer to the age-old question I've debated with probably everyone who's come on my shows, on or off camera, or on or off mic. Does optimizing your drive, now I've lost the phrase, defragging. Does defragmenting your drive do any good? I know I have a very strong opinion about that. I know people who have equally strong opinions contrary to mine. Now I'm coming to the expert.
Okay, so the answer to your question is sometimes.
Oh, great, Joe. Thanks for solving it well. Good night, folks.
Yeah, all right. So it's like this. For most people, most of the time, under ordinary circumstances, the answer is no. Defragmenting your disk will do nothing. Or, let me qualify that, it will do so little that you won't notice it. Now, what you will notice is that while you're in this process of defragmenting your drive, everything slows down because it's moving stuff all over the place. It's just really, really giving your disk a workout. And so that's going to slow down everything else for whatever it takes. It could take 24 hours, who knows. After that time, in most cases, you will perceive no speed up at all. there will be some speed up, but it will mostly be so slight that you won't be able to detect it. Now, I do mention that Mac OS X itself has built-in optimization up to a point. So one of the things it does is most files under 20 megabytes in size are automatically defragmented. And in addition, Mac OS X has this thing built in where it moves certain files that are accessed most frequently into sort of the center of your disk, what it calls the hot band, where files can be accessed most quickly. So using a defragmenting utility that goes beyond what Mac OS X does, that is to defragment larger files, can have an effect in certain situations. So, number one, if you are very low on disk space, then as files are written to your disk, they're going to be broken up into more chunks. So basically, the less free disk space you have to start with, the greater your fragmentation problem is going to be as new files are written, and so therefore the greatest impact defragmenting would have. Second, if you are using software like, oh, I don't know, HD video recording software, or multi-track audio recording, or something else that is writing or reading vast amounts of data in real time, that can really benefit from because you are reading or writing such large amounts of data all at once. Those sorts of processes can be very sensitive to fragmentation, is what I'm trying to say. So those sorts of things can benefit from defragmenting. And I should also mention, the effect of defragmentation is going to depend a lot on the speed of your hard drive. It's going to depend a lot on what software you use and how much, what demands it places on your hard drive. But if you have a relatively fast, new, modern hard drive, and if you're doing word processing and web browsing, and if you have a lot of free space on your hard drive, it just doesn't matter. It's a waste of your time. It's a waste of your money. Don't bother. But I do lay out the several sorts of situations in the book where defragmenting can help, because there are some, I don't want to misrepresent, there are cases where it does help, but there just aren't that many. And if you do the other sorts of things in the book, making sure you have enough free disk space, making sure you have enough RAM, making sure that virtual memory isn't being overused, these sorts of things, you really are unlikely to need to bother with defragmentation at all. And I'll give you a free hint. You can buy any of, I don't know, half a dozen utilities that will defragment your drive without removing any of the data from it. Or you can get an extra hard drive, use a program like Carbon Copy Cloner, which is free, or Super Duper, which costs $28. Duplicate everything from your internal hard drive onto the external drive, erase the internal drive, reverse that process, duplicate everything back, and now you have a completely defragmented hard drive. It costs you potentially nothing, as long as you have an extra drive that you can use to hold that data. And that process is actually way faster than having a defragmentation tool move around all these bits while keeping your data in place. So the only thing that sort of tool gains you is that you don't have to have an extra hard drive. You don't have to move everything off and then back on. But if you have the extra hard drive or don't mind buying it, which you can probably do for as little money as it would cost for one of these defragmenting tools, you'll actually get a much better end result by using that. And one more thing, bonus tip number 2, if you have a solid-state drive, an SSD, do not defragment it. Do not defragment it. Number 1, it's stupid because it won't benefit you in any way, because defragmentation is only a concept on mechanical hard drives. But number 2, it can actually reduce the lifespan of your SSD. It can actually, because each little portion of memory on the SSD can only be read to, or it can only be rewritten a certain number of times. So by moving all this data around uselessly on your SSD, you're actually decreasing its lifespan. So another little free tip for you. But still, buy the book. Buy all 3 books.
Yeah, I'm not expecting you to give everything away, Joe. I guess we want to give people a little sense, though, of some of the things. That tip is one I've used for a long time. The defrag, that isn't a defrag. Copy it off and copy it back. Occasionally, I found that I have to re-enter a serial number or so, but that's really it. Otherwise, the biggest cost is just time.
Right, and I should reiterate that we are trying to be scientific here. So if you're wondering, if you're thinking to yourself, yeah, but no, I really think I need to defragment. I really believe the people who are saying I have to defragment. That makes sense to me. Say, fine, do that. But before you do, run a benchmark and see what your score is. Then go ahead and do the defragment, and then run the benchmark again. Now, if your score hasn't gone way up, then okay, you wasted a little bit of time, but now you've learned a lesson. You know that it was not particularly valuable on your machine. Or you might learn the reverse. You might learn that for you, in your situation, because of what you do, it actually was very valuable. So, okay, that's useful data. And I love having useful data.
Yeah. And the other thing, though, too, about that particular method is it wouldn't hurt to have a third hard drive to back up the backup. Just to be sure. We've beat that to death, you're right, but I've done that whenever I'm going to do something like that. It's like I want at least 2 backups, including the one that I'm going to be cloning, from, 2 and then back to my original drive, just because.
Yes, more backups
you
never
know
hurt.
what may happen. Joe, let's wrap up with one other thing that people are familiar with, because there's a lot in the book that they aren't familiar with, and that's why they want to buy the book. How do you feel about, and I'm going to let you name them so we don't disparage anyone unnecessarily, some of the maintenance utilities that are sold out there that you run that are going to take your daily scripts, your monthly scripts, your weekly scripts, all those things that are allegedly built into the operating system that should take care of it all by itself. And they encourage you to do that. They empty caches, they repair disk permissions and all that. Good idea, unnecessary? Where do you stand on those?
Look at the time. Got to be going now. Well, all right. I talk about a lot of these tools in the book, and especially those that sort of say, hey, just buy me. I'm going to solve all of your maintenance problems because look at this long list of things that I'm going to do. And you just click check all the boxes and click, and I go. And now, hey, wow, your Mac is magically faster. But really, no. So I'm not going to make a blanket statement like all these utilities suck. I use some of them. I mean, they do actually do some useful things, but there's a whole wide range of variation in how useful these things are. All right, so you mentioned the maintenance scripts. So Mac OS X has these built-in scripts that, as you say, clear out log files and clean caches and update your locate database and these little things. And they're supposed to run by themselves, and if for some reason your Mac isn't on or awake at the time that they're supposed to run under certain circumstances with various combinations of Mac OS X and whatever, then they don't run, and so these log files keep accumulating and the caches keep accumulating and so on. So there's a certain there's a certain idea out there that, oh, this is just terrible because if, oh my God, these log files keep just growing and growing, pretty soon they're going to take over my whole hard drive and then, I'll just be completely stuck. But, if you take like the log files, right, because that's one of the things people talk about so much, they're really small. I mean, compared to the size of your hard drive, they're just tiny. It would take eons for these log files to grow to the size where they're going to cause any problem at all. So it just... it's not that these scripts are useless, but it's not really that big of a deal. And even if you feel like, all right, I need to, for whatever reason, my Mac isn't running these scripts automatically, so I need to take some extra effort to make them run. Okay, do that. But I mean, don't worry about it. And even so, you can use the scripts fine, but they're not going to affect your Mac speed. They really aren't. It's not the sort of thing where doing this every day is going to make your Mac 10% faster than if you don't. It just isn't like that. Over the course of 2 years, if you never run these scripts, maybe that could slow down your Mac by 0.5% or something, but there's not a correlation there. Now, you mentioned various other things that these third-party utilities do, such as clearing caches, and that's something that I talk about a lot in the book because there's this idea out there that caches are bad because caches take up disk space, and disk space is valuable, and I need my disk space, and somehow caches just intrinsically slow down everything, but they don't. That's the thing. It's exactly the opposite of caches do great things. Caches speed up your Mac. They make things way faster. Caches are good. There are 2 or 3 specific kind of rare situations in which caches can cause problems, but that's because there's a bug or an error or something that is unusual, something that is wrong, but not the normal state of your Mac. Ordinarily, caches are great. So if you run one of these utilities that just, tosses aside all of your caches every day or every week or whatever, you're shooting yourself in the foot. You're making your performance worse, not better, because then your Mac is going to go right ahead and rebuild all those caches, and that rebuilding takes time. So I talk about how you can figure that out. When is it good to clear caches, and which caches should you clear? That's a tongue twister. And when should you just really not worry about it? And so the Unix scripts and the caches, those are but 2 of those many maintenance tasks, and I sort of have them broken down into different sections. So I'm not going to say this utility is globally good or bad. What I'm going to say is this task is useful or useless, or maybe has negative value. So whether you use utility A, B, or C to clear your caches, or whether you do it manually, understand what it is that caches do, and under what circumstances this will help you, and under what circumstances it'll make your Mac slower.
Since you did True Confessions, I do too. I use some of those utilities. There are times that I feel like they may do something. There are other times I feel like they may not. I've always had the sense, though, that they certainly don't do any damage, mainly because I stick with the credible ones, the long-established ones, as opposed to the Johnny-come-lately who, like you say on their webpage, lists 400 things they're going to do, and I don't understand about 91% of them.
Well, I did encounter some, shall we say, incredible maintenance apps in the course of researching this book, and there were a few that I initially didn't put in, and then I thought, well, just for completeness, I should put them in. And then I talked it over with Adam Engst, and he's like, I just really don't feel very comfortable with these. They're kind of sketchy. I think we can just skip them. So there are some apps in there that I deliberately did not include, either because of some experience that one of us has had with the developers, or just lack of good information that it's reliable. But I would say, yeah, let's stay away from the sketchy apps. Let's stay with the if you have to use anything, stick with the known brand names that have been around for a long time.
I think we make this speech when we talk about backup software too. That these are utilities you're trusting a lot to. It's not a matter of, okay, it's an application switcher, or it's going to cover your files or something. This is potentially getting down into the guts of the operating system and doing things that you don't understand, just like backup software is often doing things to your files to back them up that you don't understand. Pay for good software, right, and really look carefully at the reputation. That doesn't mean some of the new stuff isn't good. It just means that you want to make sure that they cut their teeth on somebody else's data.
That's right. Yeah, and look for go to Macworld, go to Mac Update, go to places that review software and see what other people, especially professional reviewers, have said about it. If no one, if all you have is anecdotal reports, you have no idea where these came from or if they're reliable. If you have people that have actually done extensive testing and have hard data about the extent to which these things do or do not work, then that's certainly a lot better.
Joe, we could go on, but I think the time has come for you to tell us where we can actually get the book, how much it's going to cost us for one or the entire trilogy, and let people go and start to dig through this. I'm excited to start digging into some of this stuff just to increase my knowledge, if not to speed up my Mac.
And I'm excited for you. So as always, go to takecontrolbooks.com. Take Control of Speeding Up Your Mac costs $15. Which, if I may say so, is a bargain. Now, we have this build your own bundle thing at Take Control Books. So basically, if you buy any 3 books, you get 30% off the entire bundle. So the maintaining and troubleshooting books, if you don't already have them, a really easy, inexpensive way to get them is to buy the bundle, so you can save 30% on the whole thing. And of course, they don't just have to be my books, or they don't have to be these particular books. You can pick any 3 or more books from the entire Take Control catalog and build your own bundle with that. So that's really at the moment, that is the barring a sale or something we come up with in the future, that's the cheapest, most cost-effective way to get Take Control books. But this particular book, all by itself, $15, and I really think you'll find it to be money well spent, because it's researched, it's vetted by quite a few Mac professionals, and Adam has looked at it very closely. He was the editor. Tanya has looked at it. Dan Frakes has looked at it. And I've done lots of experiments. I've really tried very hard to get to the truth of the matter for you, and I hope you like it.
Great. Well, as always, I'll have links in the show notes straight to the Take Control homepage, where you can get this straight to Joe's book page, so you can get it there, and to see everything else that he has published, so you can build your own bundle, or just take his advice and buy the trilogy. Joe, it's fun. The next time people see me, I will have a speedier Mac, thanks to you.
Excellent.
Folks, this is MacVoices TV, the talk of the Mac community. That's Joe Kissell. He is the author of the brand new Take Control of Speeding Up Your Macintosh. I'm Chuck Joyner. Until the next time, thanks for watching. MacVoices TV is part of the MacVoices group and a member of Mac Level 10.